Hello, my fellow humans. Feeling a little weird today, so I'm going to try to get through this and hopefully bring some education and knowledge. Yeah. Hello and greetings, my fellow humans. My name is Corey Pound, and I am taking a deep dive into my own experience of autism. And I hope to bring common understanding of how life is on the spectrum from my individual perspective. Let's go. Today, I like to discuss autism and the commonality of auditory hallucinations. First, what is auditory hallucinations? Auditory hallucinations are the sensory perception of hearing noise without external stimulus. Auditory hallucinations can take the form of hearing sounds or noises such as music, animal calls, nature sounds, or background noise. They may seem like they're coming from anywhere and all around in the space around the person or the mind of the person. The noise volume may and can vary from very loud to very quiet and everything in between. Sources from National Library of Medicine and the Frontiers in Psychiatry, state that there is strong evidence for existence in high comorbidity. What is comorbidity? Let's get the definition out there. Comorbidity is the stimulus presence of two or more diseases or medical conditions in a patient. So in this um, uh, aspect, we are looking at psychosis and schizophrenia. So sources from National Library of Medicine and the Frontiers in Psychiatry state that there is strong evidence for the existence of high comorbidity between autism and psychosis, with percentages ranging up to 34.8% and several significant implications for treatment and psychosis of these patients. However, the identification of comorbid psychosis in patients with ASD represents a complex challenge. From a psychological point of view, in particular, in patients with greater deficits in nonverbal communication. So there's some difficulty trying to pinpoint what disorders patients have. Intercepting the onset of a psychotic breakdown in autism may be very difficult. Both disorders, in fact, occur along a phenotypic continuum. What is phenotypic? I will define that. Phenotypic is relating to the observable characteristics of an individual resulting from the interaction of its genotype with the environment, or in otherwise, it's an observable trait. Both disorders, in fact, occur along a phenotypic continuum of clinical severity, and in many cases, psychotic symptoms are present and attenuated in an attenuated form. What is attenuated? Attenuated means less or weakened. Historically, schizophrenia and autism were judged to be closely related subsequently through epidemiological studies. These two syndromes have been reconsidered as two distinctive entities, each with its own characteristics, clinical course, and typical onset. However, there is a growing number of studies that focus their attention on the link between schizophrenia and ASD, finding significant overlaps in genetic studies such as neuroimaging data, clinical signs, and cognitive features. There is strong evidence for the existence of high rates of comorbidity between autism and psychosis. According to literature from the National Library of Medicine and the Frontiers in Psychiatry, up to 34.8% of patients with a diagnosis of ASD can show psychotic symptoms, and similarly, autistic traits have been reported in SCZ, i.e., schizophrenia, in a percentage ranging between 3.6 to 60%. Pretty big broad spectrum right there between the two. That's probably why they have complexity there. ASD is composed by different levels of complexity, with frequent comorbidity with intellectual disability, and recently there is growing attention on the behavioral equivalence of schizophrenia in people with intellectual disability and ASD. Both ASD and SCZ occur along a phenotypic continuum of severity and are I always stumble over this word, susceptible to common environment risk factors such as advanced perennial age, pregnancy, and birth complications. Also, migration status may be something to look at. Precisely because of this high comorbid rate between ASD and SCZ, many authors hypothesize the existence of a significant vulnerability in patients with neurodivergent disorders. Impairments in information processing are common in ASD and may favor the risk for a transition to psychosis. The expression of autistic core symptoms may vary significantly, among ASD patients and may be influenced by the disorder's age of onset. Moreover, psychotic and autistic subthreshold or attenuated systems can make even more difficult to recognize these two disorders. So, with that said, we are an enigma. We are confusing the medical field, more or less. But I'm going to give you and leave you with my uh, experience with auditory hallucinations. I do have visual hallucinations, and I guess I can touch on some of those too, but they're not what you would think. Okay, auditory hallucinations for me um, is I have a chirp that comes to the side of my ear or somewhere over on this side of my head. And it's a chirp that is similar to that of what you hear that's in someone's home, their security system, that chirping noise. It gets increasingly worse or louder um, when I'm stressed out or I'm trying to focus really hard on doing something. It could be reading, I could be watching TV, uh, anything that takes a lot of energy and a lot of focus from me. Um, and I can come back to my visual. That happens also when I'm stressed out, but mostly when I'm hitting my burnout wall or a meltdown where I just need to kind of like remove myself from any triggering stimuli, which for me a lot is crowds, certain noises, certain smells. I'm very triggered by smells. Smells really just throw my mood and everything off. But back onto the visual. For me, a visual hallucination are during these stressful states. It's not all the time. I'm sure there are some um, ASD people and patients or people, humans who have to deal with it all day or on a regular. For me, it's during the stressful times. My visuals are like particles in the air. If you see them through the window, certain light, you can see the particles moving like that. For me, they're like particles. They're white. They're bigger than actual particles. And they kind of dance around and float around. Um, and occasionally, when I get really, really stressed out and it triggers a migraine, they do shift to like black or um, it's really bad. It'll be a black blob, like a kidney bean, and it floats around, it disappears, and then it comes in my peripheral, out of my peripheral. For me, um, I, it's not an everyday thing. It's usually when I'm stressed or triggered, or like I said, focusing too much, or meltdown phase, burnout phase, stuff like that. Um, that's a little about my experience with the annoyances of our disorder. I hope it brings you some knowledge and some education, and let you know that you're not alone. There's a lot of us out there, and we should have each other's back and try to learn from each other. That's all we can do, right? Peace and love. Take care. Bye bye.